the additional code enforcement staff that we brought aboard. It's not a sustainable fiscal model with the code enforcement staff added in, and requires the town's commitment of general fund revenues to continue to fund code enforcement activities. The number in here for fully burdened top step salaries is around $480,000 a year, but understanding that about $85,000 of that is already budgeted and being paid by the general fund for the current town employee. So tonight, staff is asking for council's direction to staff to identify potential general funding sources for the permanent staffing of both the admin assistant and the supervising code enforcement officer, and the development of the necessary job description for the December town council meeting. And so the timelines that we're looking at is to bring back the revised co-director job descriptions at next week's council meeting, do a presentation of potential general fund funding sources and the supervising code enforcement officer job description at the December meeting, and that could put us in a position to be able to start recruiting for town positions in January. And it could be that that fiscal model is a blend of general fund and private development. We just need council's direction for us to explore what different options work. We certainly want to find a financial situation that will work in the long term, because these are long-term positions. And so if council had any specific questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Any questions? So we're not going to discuss this tonight. We're going to discuss it next week.
What I would like, if possible, is if I can have it, is just direction for staff to come back in December, specifically about some funding options for code enforcement.
December or November?
Next week is about the 2 co-director job descriptions, and that's a non-monetary thing. But I'd like direction to be able to start sourcing different funding options for code enforcement to come back in December. So ideally, we do director first, then we start doing code enforcement, because that would really fall under the other director, so I'd like their input on it also.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm not opposed to this organization. I'm just curious, have we ever considered putting code enforcement under the police department? Apparently it's there in a lot of towns.
It hasn't come up at our level before, but certainly open to discussion.
There might be some advantages to doing that.
Certainly something to take a look at also. Right now, as I'm sure you all know, the majority of our code enforcement cases are having to do with interim housing, but we foresee in this next 5 to 10 year stretch, that's going to start turning into construction violations, building without permits and stuff. It's not as obvious now because there's not as much going on, but we believe that will be a push coming forward later on, and we might be able to look at more hybrid and officer models that are a blend of building inspectors and code enforcement that also shares the financial burden for the positions too, and switch hitters that depending on the workload we can assign accordingly.
One thing I wanted to ask, I know
Yes, sir.
last meeting we were talking about the staffing levels, and it seems like in this proposed model there would be basically the same number of people, just different different responsibilities.
You're correct. So if we can get in another town officer, that allows us another signatory for tickets. So as many contract officers or inspectors that I'm assigned, I'm still going to bottleneck at the point of issuing citations. It needs to be a town employee who's code enforcement. I only have one. So this will help that.
And do you feel that this is where the bottlenecks are happening now, as far as, because we're hearing complaints of code enforcement. Is that where you see the holdups?
I think that will help, yes. In order to have another signatory on it, we've also worked in-house to change the inspections. So I have my contract officers doing first inspection, but I have the town officer doing second so that he's ready to issue the ticket without having to go back and double check. So we're hoping to eliminate some of the redundancy in the process right now. But we just started doing that 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So.
Other questions, comments?
How will the abatement process impact employees?
The abatement for the RVs or for the tree program?
When a property goes into abatement, how is that going to impact the workload, or will it?
Actually, that workload ends up getting shared not only between code enforcement staff, but our legal counsel as well. We prepare it, but then it kind of rises to a level higher than us, at a point by the time it comes to you. So it's a shared responsibility, but
But it pretty much goes, once it's identified as abatement, it goes up to legal and kind of out of the.
exactly. Not that, we'll assist when it comes time, but that's when we start working with private contractors to remove the items that are there. It won't be us hooking up to, RVs and pulling them out, but it'll be part of the process, but it won't be as hands-on.
Well, I just want to see, there's so many different people involved in this, the people in the RVs, the people rebuilding, the people with standing houses, so I think we have to be fair to all of them.
Yes.
And the other thing is, to the people in RVs, they need to meet our criteria, but I think we need to maybe in cases help them meet that criteria, which may require cooperation from PG&E and PID and everything so they can accomplish this.
Yes.
And so I think we need to have some work there between all the agencies to make sure that we can make it easy and feasible for it to happen.
You're absolutely right, and we've started as, an organization again, meeting twice a month with PID staff, so we can do exactly what you're saying, coordinate our projects, making sure that we're staying on top of the ones that we need to stay on top of.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, absolutely.
In the funding options, are you also, I know historically the town really didn't have an abatement fund.
You're right.
Will this be part of some of the funding options? If we start abating, we're going to have to identify a source of funds that we can use to abate,
You're right.
to then hopefully wait on reimbursement, 20 years down the road. So will that be part of?
That will actually be a separate conversation. I think that when we're ready, legal counsel will be meeting about some potential cases with the council, so we can get an idea of what that cost is for those. And that way we know what kind of conversation we need to have with the council about allocating the appropriate funds for it. It's been forever, if ever, that we've done this, so it's hard to pull back on historics.
I just want to say I'm in full support of this. I think this is a great division of duties. I've been concerned because you have had way too much load. And there's only so many balls you can have in the air at one time. So that's not a knock on you, that's just, I think it was too much. So I like this separation of divisions. I do agree with you. I know that police has done this in some jurisdictions. I believe ours is unique, and I think you're right, there's going to be a lot of violations with buildings and that type of stuff, things that are out of the police, and I watch what they have to deal with animal control, and I just don't want to put something else on them to keep them from what we want them to be focused on. I think I like it. You're right, we got to talk about funding for it and get that direction. That's another discussion that we need to get on, but the division makes perfect sense to me.
And to PD's credit, they've been incredible partners with us. So if we ever need them to accompany us to a site or to get us some more information, they are right there for us. And as they see stuff, they'll pass it over too. So it's a good partnership right now. So at the council's pleasure, if a majority of you feel to give direction for bringing back some funding options, staff can do that for the December
All in
meeting.
concurrence with that?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, board.
Right. No consent calendar. We're going to our, public communication, I'm sorry. Do we have any cards to this?
I have no cards on the title.
Ward, nothing to say?
We're not encouraging. All right, we're going to public hearing 5A. Consider continuing the public hearing from to December 8th for future consideration of adopting resolution 20 30. 30?
37?
I'll take 37 if that's it. 37?
Sure.
Okay. Resolution of the Town of Council and the Town of Paradise declaring and determining a certain area with the Town of Paradise arterial and collector underground district 20-1 and finding and determining the public necessity of health and safety required to remove the poles, overhead wires, and associated structures in order of removal of the same underground district 20-1. I believe I need to dismiss myself from this because of FPPC, I believe it is, they're fine.
Me as well.
All right, good evening, Vice Mayor Crowder and remaining council. As mentioned on the agenda, we are continuing our public hearing from the October 13th Paradise Town Council meeting relating to undergrounding of utilities in Paradise. So I'm going to be running the slide. Okay, that works. So I'll quickly recap. We had a longer discussion on October 13th, but I'm going to go ahead and recap this issue as quickly as I can. So following the campfire in 2018, the Paradise community, as we started to recover from the devastation caused by the fire, we did highlight a couple of key points in that timeline and history, one of which being the community meeting where we discussed the infrastructure being reconstructed after the fire, being temporary when it comes to restoring utilities in Paradise. This was reiterated numerous times and across repopulation meetings and in the public forum as well, in describing how the community was to rebuild and we needed time to plan that. But the infrastructure in place to get the town open as soon as possible was indeed temporary. In the spring of 2019, our long-term recovery plan commenced, and in May 22nd, 2019, PG&E made an announcement for all overhead utility infrastructure to be placed underground. June 25th, 2019, our long-term recovery plan was adopted, and in that long-term recovery plan, we identified undergrounding of utilities as one of the most critical partner-led projects. And verbatim in the long-term recovery plan, it states that the town's expectation was that communication companies will follow suit as utility poles are combustible and can block egress routes in a wildfire. And we are all too familiar with that. So continuing on our timeline as far as council action and staff reports, in October of 2019, we approved a dig once policy, which requires future coordination between joint trench opportunities on construction projects moving forward, but did not give us much tools in relating to going back in time and legally requiring utilities to be placed underground. Speaking of tools, earlier this year on June 9th, 2020, staff provided an update on the 3 tools we were advancing in working towards this ultimate goal of all utilities underground. Those 3 tools being our broadband feasibility study, which is still ongoing, our Rule 20A district for arterials and collectors only, and that has always been and will continue to be for those arterials and collectors. And residential roads are ineligible for Rule 20A, but that does not mean that our intent for ultimate goal of the project is for all utilities to be underground on all roads. We were also provided an avenue for filing a formal CPUC complaint. At the July 14th, 2020 meeting, council directed staff to file a CPUC complaint and notice a public hearing for a Rule 20A district if an agreement was not reached within 45 days. Since that time, on October 21st, after the direction of the council, we did file that CPUC complaint, and it states one of the critical paragraphs in that complaint was during the campfire, one of the primary obstacles preventing the evacuation of persons was the burning of utility poles and wires adjacent to roadways. This caused a deadly health and safety situation when poles and wires fell across roadways, which resulted in impassable areas that trapped residents in an inferno. To prevent this from happening in the future, no poles and wires can be located above ground within the jurisdiction of Paradise, California. Moving forward, on October 13th, without that agreement reached, we noticed our public hearing for the creation of the Rule 20A district. With the Rural 28 District on the agenda for collectors and arterials and the CPUC complaint written response from Comcast and AT&T due on October 14th, 2020, Comcast requested a 2-week extension to both the consideration of the district and the CPUC complaint responses. At this council meeting, staff presented this information and recommended approval, and council did concur. Since that extension was granted, staff was approached by PG&E, Comcast, and AT&T representing agreements were reached and remaining work was merely legal formalities. An additional 30-day extension was requested for the CPUC complaint, and a new deadline for the complaint response from Comcast and AT&T is now November 25th, 2020. Let's see how I'm doing. Great. Here on your screen is a picture of Castle Drive. This is one of those residential roads I describe as a Tier 2, 3 road in Paradise, where the undergrounding work by PG&E is complete, and this road would not be eligible for our Rural 28 district. And so that's an important distinction here. And there are still poles above ground because neither Comcast or AT&T have joined this specific trench, nor anywhere in Paradise to date, with over 30 miles complete by PG&E. It is our understanding that if in lack of a solution, that these poles will remain at our roadside edge without any further agreement by Comcast or AT&T. And so I just want to point out that with these combustible poles, regardless of the road that they're on, there's still a problem for our community after we've been given the direction by our town in the long-term recovery plan process. So with that, I want to highlight our objectives and restate it one more time for the record in case there was any confusion. Our residents have provided their directive in the long-term recovery plan: underground all overhead utilities in Paradise. We are stronger together, and if only 1 out of 3 or 2 out of 3 utility companies go underground on all roads, the community's expectations for safety in Paradise will continue to be unmet. We understand the financial ramifications of these decisions, and they are real, yet we believe the financial and social ramifications of inaction on undergrounding utilities in Paradise will permanently impact our ability to recover and rebuild. So tonight, with all of this information and the progress made between the 3 companies, we are recommending a continuation of the public hearing once again to allow for the legal reviews to be complete and commence this item again at the December 8th, 2020 Paradise Town Council meeting. And we are very, very hopeful we can report problem solved, issue taken care of, and we can move forward and working together with these in our recovery through Paradise. So with that, I guess I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
I have a question. 30 miles have already been completed by PG&E. Have you actually seen their agreements, and do they include AT&T and Comcast reopening those trenches and going in them?
Yeah, so actually 30 miles is probably light on the work to be complete. It's probably by this time, I think 50 by the end of this calendar year. But I do know PG&E has been thinking forwardly about the potential participation between Comcast and AT&T, and spare ducts have been installed in these trenches. And so we're working together. They're working amongst themselves. I have not seen any agreements. That is not something I'm privy to. But I do know that once an agreement is made, that the spare ducts are there waiting for AT&T and Comcast to join those trenches that have already been complete. And we are grateful for that forward thinking.
Any more questions from Mark?
Do you think December 8th will give us a resolution?
I'm very, very hopeful. I really am.
It's gonna be a long meeting.
Yes, it will. I'm very, very hopeful. I believe this town presents a unique opportunity for these companies to make these investments in our recovery, and we're just hopeful that they will choose the right thing for a safer Paradise.
I'm okay with extending to December 8th, but I don't want to keep doing this. They really need to come to a resolution.
Yep, I concur with that sentiment. I believe you just need to open the public hearing, and then if there are no comments, we can continue it to the December 8th meeting.
Thank you for your work on this, Mark. This was, here we are once again in a very unusual situation, and we're very appreciative of what you've done.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
6:31, I'd like to open the meeting to any public comment.
I have 2 cards, Vice Mayor Crowder, on this item. The first card is from Ward Gabriel.
Good evening, council. Sorry about my absence, but you know, when you're moving all by yourself, it takes a lot of your time.
If
Welcome,
you-
Mr. Manager and staff. Sorry I took so long to get back, but this is a pretty interesting topic.
If
And,
you'd like to take your mask off, you're 6 feet away from everyone,
I
you're
know.
welcome to
Thank
do
you.
that.
Yes, I appreciate it. My history on this ridge goes back to 1975. That's not my first trip up here, but that's when Grandma and Grandpa lived here, and I have a lot of experience with the experiences they had, because many times it was with Grandpa's disability. Grandma would say, can you come up and, whatever it was, fill in the thing there. Frequently, there were power outages up here, and it wasn't because we had a catastrophic fire. It was either a tree through a line or a vehicle hit a pole. Now, had we undergrounded our community a long time ago when it was possible, and there wasn't much here to do other than that, we would have avoided a whole lot of those instances. Yes, it's different than a single event where we knocked down lots of poles and lots of trees, but the long history here is PG&E has cost us a loss of power many times because Pence, Clark, Wagstaff, Billy, and Pearson have had poles hit by vehicles and knocked the power out. And it happened again this morning. For over 3 hours, a vehicle hit a pole. PG&E texted those people who had meters in that area. We found out 3 hours later the power was back in. It blinked for a while, and then it was back on steady. If we don't get them to see on our main streets, not where you're doing 25 on your 1 block long street, but where we're doing 45 and sometimes 50, especially with some of the heavier construction equipment now, big trucks, pickups, that are speeding and they hit a pole, we're going to lose power. That's just a fact of life. It has happened many times in the past, but we have a lot of people who work here now from out of town. They don't care about our 35-mile-per-hour speed limits. But even at 35, if you hit a pole pretty solid with a pickup truck, we're going to lose power. We should have undergrounded a long, long time ago. And putting it off for another month, and then putting it off for another month, and letting them off the hook, especially on the main streets. Pearson, Clark, Wagstaff, Skyway, Billy, etc. We have got to get those areas undergrounded ASAP. Otherwise, we will just continue to go through this just like this morning. Thank you for your time.
I just want to clarify that PG&E is undergrounding. PG&E is undergrounding and has already completed much. This is specifically about the comms that are left on the poles. So Comcast and AT&T, they're left on the poles. So the poles are still standing even though PG&E has undergrounded.
Yeah.
Just
Well, there are a
wanted
lot
to
of streets
clarify.
with no poles, and both services are underground. I have one.
And the next card is from Carol Wright.
Hello. I was here at the last meeting because I was concerned with the communication lines because the assessment crew that had been out had told me that they looked up in their information and said that the town had instructed them not to install the conduit or I think you used a different term, to allow for the communication lines to be undergrounded on my part of Edgewood. The photo that's featured on the slide presentation that was just showed is my street. And that's where the most deaths were on the day of the fire, the campfire. And so I would like to be certain that my part of the street is not being excluded from this. And I was told I need to talk to Mark, who I believe is this gentleman. He got my phone number. I haven't heard anything. I would like to get Mark's phone number this time. So I'd like to make sure that our street is given the same consideration as the rest of the town.
Thank you.
That was my last card.
Gina, I had a couple complaints. No sound for people at home.
Colette tested it, and there was sound when she tested it, so I'm not sure.
Well,
When will the new system be up and running?
It was supposed to be on the 10th,
But a new system is coming soon.
Is coming as soon as possible. Yes.
Okay, so at 6:36, we'll close the public discussion. Council, any questions?
No, I think we,
We need a motion.
Continue to December 8th.
Yes, please.
I'll second.
Motion by Jones, seconded by Schuster, to continue the public hearing to December 8th. Roll call vote. Vice Mayor Crowder?
Aye.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Schuster?
Aye.
Councilmember Zuccolillo is absent, and Mayor Bowman is absent.
Thank you. All right, council consideration, 6A, consider approving the First Amendment to the agreement between the Town of Paradise and Tetra Tech to provide professional arborist services to support the private hazardous tree removal program.
Good evening, Mayor Boland and Council. I'm here tonight to request that we increase the not to exceed on the Tetra Tech contract by $335,000. This would give us an additional 90 days on the contract to take us through the deadline that the council set of December 4th for tree felling, removing, and certifying clear of hazardous trees for those properties enrolled in the private program. Just to clarify the funding framework, FEMA provides 75% of the funding, Cal OES 18.75% of the funding, and the town 6.25% of the funding. So when we set the $500,000 not to exceed, it was essentially a financial benchmark with a lot of the program developments unknown. We did not at the time know the enrollment deadline or the certification deadline. We also did not anticipate the failure rate of the first compliance inspections would be 48%, requiring a second inspection on almost 50% of the properties enrolled in the private program. And we also could not anticipate at the time the enrollment deadline and mobilization dates of the government program, which we're getting closer to. But since the contract began, Tetra Tech has completed over 7,000 courtesy roadside assessments, and this enabled us to separate the eligible properties from the ineligible properties, which removed 1,294 properties, saving that number of homeowners from having to enroll in the program, and from our contractors from having to go out and inspect properties that do not have hazardous trees. We have also completed 1,500 inspections through Tetra Tech with the current not to exceed on the contract, but as I mentioned, that 48% failure rate is necessitating that return visit. We are currently sitting at 2,374 properties that are at risk for abatement, so that's very relevant for our code enforcement conversation. Just over 1,000 of those are privately enrolled and have not removed trees, and so this is really our focus with Tetra Tech over the next 90 days before we formally start the abatement process. I'm available to answer any questions.
Questions?
Do you have a mobilization date for the government program?
Well, I was excited to announce that all 4 protests on the bid were denied and the state was able to move forward. I have not heard that the notice to award has gone out, but we are hearing that it's going to be, in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, well, we're hoping that mid-November would be a good target date for actual cutting.
And something that we communicated, and I know Mayor Boland communicated this really clearly in our meeting with Deputy Director Burris, is that we're not going to get ahead of publicity on the government program anymore. So the state is very reluctant to talk about their tree felling deadline until trees start coming down. So they're planning a press day to follow the actual removal of trees once those contractors mobilize, which will be very quick once the contracts are signed. So I think the path ahead looks very positive, but we're not going to get ahead of ourselves, and the state's not going to get ahead of themselves either.
Thank you.
Yep.
So what's the chances of this being the last time they come back for?
For Tetra Tech, I mean, the only thing that gives me pause is the 2,400 properties sitting at risk for abatement. But we will see over the next couple of weeks as we send out those first abatement notices, what the response is. So we know for weed abatement, for example, they're getting about 80% compliance on those letters they're sending out. So if we can anticipate this will push up our compliance. However, we have 4 weeks left for properties enrolled in the private program to remove their trees. So I think we can get a lot done in 90 days, but I think we're going to be at a point where we're going to need to very critically discuss this abatement risk. And the town is doing everything, our tree advocates on social media, through every channel to encourage folks to enroll in the government program, because as soon as those contractors mobilize, the state will essentially set that enrollment deadline in the government program, and then that will close also, and then we are just sitting with abatement risk properties. So we're doing everything we can in the media, on social media, to help everybody understand what these deadlines really mean, so that they can move into the government program if they're in the private program, for example. So to answer your question, I'm fairly confident that we can complete what we have committed to the private program, in the sense that all of these notices are going to go out and folks are going to understand that they need to comply by December 4th, and then we're going to have an abatement conversation.
So they're going to reduce their crew considerably. I mean, once it gets back to the second round, they don't need 40 arborists or whatever it is to go do that, probably, right?
Great point. So it's the government contractors who are going to be working with the town on abatement, not Tetra Tech. So Tetra Tech is going to phase out as the private program really closes.
Okay.
And so the work ahead of us in the next 4 weeks is really encouraging that switch from the private program into the government program.
Have you been able to find all of these people who are not in one program or another and need to be doing soming? Is it a matter of not being able to find them, or is it mostly that they're just ignoring you?
Let's see, we have a list of unenrolled properties, most with phone numbers and some with email addresses, and they've all been called by our tree advocates, and they've all been emailed multiple times. So it's possible that we don't have a phone number or email address for the unenrolled properties, but they have been mailed a packet by the ROE Center. What could be happening, of course, is as these properties are transacted, as these sales occur on the properties, the new property owners aren't even aware of the programs. And so there's that additional education that we're doing. And the ROE Center is following up with each new property owner as those properties change hands, helping them understand that the ROE is required. So that's why this unenrolled number is kind of going up over the last couple of weeks, is because as the county catches up on their records of properties that have transacted, they're finding that they need ROEs for properties that have changed hands.
But it's not really a matter of you can't find people.
I would say that's not the reason folks haven't responded.
Okay, thank you.
Katie, this is kind of an aside, but a number of people have commented that they have been told that they have trees on their property that need to come down, but they don't know which ones.
So the town's arborists, Tetra Tech, are not contracted to assess and mark trees. We are only there to do compliance inspections to confirm that the trees have been removed. So if folks have enrolled in the private program, it is incumbent upon them to hire the arborists to do the property assessment, to mark the trees for removal, and then to come in and remove them.
Is there a possibility that there will be a difference of opinion between Tetra Tech saying that
Sure.
these trees need to come down and the personal arborist saying, no, they don't need to come down?
Yes, and we are actually working through those issues as they come up, for sure. We have a great relationship with the Tetra Tech arborists, and we have the consultants sort of as a go-between. But folks who are enrolled in the private program do have the option to do an inspection access form where they have their own arborists certify their property clear of trees. So should they choose to do that, they can complete the certification of their property with their own arborist.
And you can, and I did this today, you can ask for an arborist to meet you out the property and discuss with you. They can't mark the trees or anything, but they can discuss with you why. And I got mine cleared up today and figured out.
So that's a great point. So we have found that personal connection on property, if it's possible, and we have done some creative work with those property owners who are out of town in terms of connecting them with the arborists so that they can actually be on site. But our arborists with Tetra Tech are not authorized to actually mark the trees. And so the property owner during the inspection could certainly do that, or they could have the visual, they could take photographs, they could do all of that. But the work of marking the trees and removing the trees has to be done by the private property owner through hiring the arborist to do that work. So our inspectors or our arborists are just doing the inspections. And when we did, if I could say, the courtesy roadside assessments, we did alert folks when trees were found on their property, but it was not an assessment report. It was just, you are eligible for enrollment in the program.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So next week, will we be talking about the December 4th deadline for the private program?
Yes, during my monthly disaster recovery update, I will be providing all the latest information on the tree program and hopefully more information on tree felling mobilization.
Is it something that we could possibly, well, I can get into that later. I'll talk about it. And the other question is, all trees that were damaged by the fire in town will be removed one way or another?
Yes, so this
That was
is,
a question that I get quite often.
right. So this is the first project that's funded for hazardous tree removal, and it's a FEMA public assistance project. And then there is a hazard mitigation project that we have also applied for those category 4 trees. And that funding we've been notified that funding will only be available after this FEMA PA project closes, but we're definitely working to push that funding become available so that property owners can do that work sooner rather than later.
Category 4 means
Back 40. So
Right.
these are trees that are ineligible.
on the streets.
Right. So still eligible public and private roads, but trees that are not eligible for removal in the FEMA PA project, which is what we're doing right now.
Okay.
Will that program be a voluntary program, or will that be a mandatory for the trees that are left?
So what the hazard mitigation funds will do, if approved, is provide 75% of the funding toward that tree removal, and the property owner will be responsible for 25%. And so we are already talking about, in anticipation of that hazard mitigation funding becoming available to us, we are already talking about how we're going to coordinate that process, because it will be a lift similar to the county ROE center. The town will just be administering it.
But as far as we haven't made a determination whether it's going to be mandatory or a voluntary?
I think when those funds become available, I think is, because I'm trying to remember the ordinance, the hazardous tree removal ordinance, that was specifically for trees that were eligible through this program.
So we don't have an ordinance, again, we don't have an ordinance that says that we have to have all fire trees, every tree that was burned by the fire has to be removed from Paradise. Is that in our ordinance? Is that not right now? So that needs to come back and we need to discuss
The
that.
ordinance is just for trees that are,
That fit the
Eligible
program.
for the FEMA program.
that could affect the right-of-way
Yeah.
that is within the town.
Okay.
So we anticipate getting news on the hazard mitigation round of funding for those category 4 trees in 2021. And at that time, we'll be setting policy and administration of those funds for folks to make those funds available to property owners who still need to remove those back 40 trees.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. So those will be brought back. Okay. All right. Any cards to this?
I do not have any cards on this item.
Cards? What's the wish of the council?
Move for approval of item 6A as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Zuccolillo, seconded by Crowder. Roll call vote, Vice Mayor Crowder.
Aye.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Councilmember Schuster.
Aye.
Councilmember Zuccolillo.
Aye.
And Mayor Bowman.
Aye. Thank you, Kate. So we'll move on to 7A, council-initiated agenda items. Consider authorizing a letter from the town council to PG&E requesting PG&E hold a town hall meeting, explain this public safety power shutoff to the community. Member Crowder.
So, after our latest PSPS, and I'm sure we've all received a lot of phone calls and emails to such, I contacted James Gallagher's office and said, hey, is there anything we can do? Well, he scheduled a phone conference that I was invited to participate with his office with the PG&E Governmental Affairs Office And we had about a 45-minute discussion, and they were trying to explain why these happen when we have no wind here and what have you, and they had said they'd keep us up to date, and that was about the extent of the call. So following up with Gallagher's office, we kind of thought that the best thing we could do was to get a town hall meeting and let our citizens hear directly from PG&E what's going on, why it's going on, when it's going to end, and how it's going to end, and what their game plan is. And because of timing, we're getting into the bad weather, what have you, I went ahead and I sent a letter to PG&E asking for it. They did accept. It's going to happen at one of the schools. Tom Taylor is also going to participate as the schools are just having a heck of a time with these PSPSs. Because of timing, because of the Brown Act, I couldn't come to the council first, being that I can only talk to one other council person. So the letter's written, it's sent, the meeting's going to happen, but now we would like to make it town official, and that's what happened.
Do you know where it's going to be?
It's going to be at one of the schools, and Tom Taylor is working on that. We should have an answer on that in the next day or so. And there's a copy of the letter that I sent them on the back of the agenda, and it actually went to Aaron Johnson, not Dan Blair. But anyway, that kind of says everything that I told them.
So the letter's already been sent, so you're just asking us to concur, to say whatever? I'm not sure exactly.
I'd like the town to participate in this, send a letter again under the town or what have you, but I'd like the town to be part of the process. And even though PG&E basically is going to be their meeting, they're going to run it, because we need to hear from them what's going on. So I'm looking for the town to get behind this.
So what is your desired outcome of this meeting, of this town hall?
That we can come to some sort of resolution with the PSPS as far as if we don't have wind in Paradise, that we can keep the power on in Paradise. Our kids are losing days of education. They're falling behind. Tom Taylor's very concerned about that. Our businesses are hanging by a thread, and our residents are at wit's end, and we just can't go 5 years until this undergrounding process is complete. There are ways to isolate which we've seen some of it with the downtown being left on, and we just need to have some answers and why we can't do this. The conversation I had with their government affairs was this power can be shut off in a very short amount of time. It's all computer generated. And my question, which I really couldn't get an answer from them on, was just because they say they're shutting the power off at 2 p.m., if there's no wind, why do they shut it off at 2 p.m.? If the wind starts at 8 o'clock that night, turn the power off at 8 o'clock that night. So this is what we're hoping to accomplish. And we have Gallagher's office behind it, and we have Lamalfa's office behind it, who will all be there as well.
I feel like there's two different things here. I think that there is the piece about asking PG&E to be a little bit more efficient when they're shutting off power due to a wind event. I think that's one thing. And I think the other thing is also asking PG&E to be more engaged with the community in terms of education and why they're doing these. So on that second piece, we have PG&E has been at our town hall meetings. I don't know if they're planning to be at the next town hall meeting, but that's something that we could certainly look into. And they have a presence at the efficient in the way that they handle the PSPSs, I think would be better accomplished outside of the public arena. I think that that's something that certainly the town, or we could draft a letter specific to that issue. Or get behind it.
Yeah, I disagree, Melissa. I've heard from enough people in town, maybe you haven't, but they deserve to have the answers, and they don't need to come from us, because it's not.
That wasn't what I meant. That wasn't what I said. That's okay.
Anyway, they need to hear directly from the source of what's going on. The source is the one that can answer when it's going to be fixed, what else can be done, what are the alternatives. There are other communities that are facing the same thing that have power generators provided by PG&E.
I'm agreeing with you that their education
Okay, then I'm
process-
missing your point.
I said there's two things that I think are applicable. One is the education process that PG&E needs to do better.
Okay.
And I agree with that.
Okay.
I don't think that a one-time big rally meeting is going to accomplish that, though. I do disagree with that.
And your justification is how do you say that?
The second, because it's ongoing. I think it's something that is ongoing. You're not going to get everybody there in one room to hear what's happening.
Okay, so let's not
And
try.
it's not an efficient way to accomplish education.
I disagree.
Okay, that's fine. And then the other point is PG&E being more effective in the way that they do these PSPSs. I agree with you there as well, but I believe that rather than having the community yell that it's not good, that having people sit down and talk in a smaller group and say, how can we make this more efficient? How can you, PG&E, make this more efficient? What are the things that can be done to make it more efficient? That's our jobs here are to represent people in those types of meetings and to be able to sit down with them and say, hey, our community has these concerns. We would like answers from you for these concerns.
Okay, and you've had the opportunity to.
Could I jump in here? I think in a perfect world, Melissa, what you're saying is true, but I happen to know that our prior town manager did all of that, asked those questions of PG&E, did not get satisfactory answers to those questions. And the one thing that I think that this meeting would accomplish is it will force PG&E, because they don't want to be on the defensive at this meeting. If they've already agreed to come, my guess is they're putting together a game plan that they can share with the community, and the meeting is forcing them to do that, which they never would respond to what Lauren's questions were. I mean, they told her that undergrounding coming up Skyway was gonna make the PSPS events in Paradise much less frequent. This fall has proven that to be false. So if the meeting does nothing else than force PG&E to come up with a game plan they're going to share with the community, I think it would be worth it.
I agree, Steve. Thanks for your work on this. I think what'll be nice, I know we've talked about this, is they're hoping to get Aaron Johnson there, who can make some of these decisions, where when we're having the trailers or the brick or something, they're given information that they're allowed to give, but they're not able to make any decisions or changes. And having some of the higher ups at this meeting would, I think, go a lot farther if there's a solution. They could see that, to say, okay, we're going to do this, or we're going to stand behind this. So I for one, and people have been calling us like, well, why do these people have power on, and why do we don't, and our lines are underground and theirs aren't, and we're sitting there going, oh, no, I'm not PG&E. So I think this is a wonderful idea, and appreciate all your work on this. I'm definitely for it.
I think the one thing that we could also accomplish with this is Comcast and AT&T could also be somehow generated or something. There's people that have power during these PSPSs, and they have no communication. There's no Comcast or no AT&T, those are down. Like, really? I mean, and I'd like to see us, maybe that could be a part of that discussion too, is why those that do the right and want to get generators and keep themselves with lights, then they have nothing as far as communication.
Well, and two of these PSPS were during a partial town and an entire town evacuation warning.
Right.
And this is where we've got to come to
Right.
some solution.
Okay, what's the wishes of the council?
Do it. I support Vice Mayor Crowder's letter, and
We all in concurrence of that?
let's get behind it.
Are we I'm still not clear. Are we signing our names to this letter, or are we drafting another letter? I'm not sure what exactly the council is supposed to be doing.
Yeah, just so you guys know, that why this is here is because it is something that Vice Mayor Crowder would like to have on town letterhead. So based on that, it does need to be a support by the majority of the council for that to be on town letterhead. So that's what this letter will have. And then how you want it drafted, if you want different things drafted in it, that's totally up to you. If you want it just how it is. But once it goes on town letterhead, it is of the support of the council that it will be moving this forward.
I don't think we can just take this letter and slap it onto town letterhead because the meeting's already set. I think the letter should have a different tone and say that we understand this meeting has already been set and the town of Paradise supports this meeting and is looking forward to hearing PG&E's rationale and game plan or whatever words you
Okay.
want to use.
We can put that
I would
together.
agree with that.
So we're
I would
revising.
say this, I hope in the future, none of us do letters in our position for the town of Paradise before we do this meeting. I hope this meeting comes first. I understand the timing was not good. I understand that. I'm not tuning one out, but it's something I always got to think about too, is, I'm representing the council and everything I do or say, and we're kind of going backwards on this.
And I get that, but with weather changing, this is an outdoor event.
Sure.
It's not an indoor event
Sure.
because
No,
of
I-
COVID and all of that, so we're
I'm not upset. I'm not upset about it. I'm just saying it's something all of us are going to think about, that our name on something represents all of us here,
Agreed.
and we just need to be careful with that. So, are we all in concurrence to move forward with a letter that is in support of this?
A bit of clarification.
Yes.
So it doesn't, I can't tell, and I don't know all the background on this, but it does not look like a date is set. It looks like a date is proposed. Maybe a date is set and maybe it isn't, I don't know. But perhaps the motion might be along the lines of it, and depending on who's going to sign it, I don't know if Vice Mayor Crowder's going to sign it or Mayor Boland, but a motion that a letter be prepared in accordance with this discussion, subject to the review of whoever's signing it, and it goes out on the town's letterhead
On a
And there-
certain date.
on a certain date. And it can
maybe
be
place-
clarified that we're seeking to confirm the meeting date, or it can clarify that I understand that pursuant to this earlier letter from Mr. Crowder, who we wrote as an individual, it's set for a certain date, however, the letter needs to be framed up.
Okay.
But it should be made subject to review and approval by whoever's signing it.
That's a good idea. Thank you. Appreciate that.
So I'll modify it just to, you want to make any changes, Steve, or you want to do it, Greg, or do you have to say who, or just somebody?
Whoever's going to sign the letter.
Well, it's typically the mayor.
Okay,
So-
so,
Yeah, I'll sign and we'll just come up with a date and if they don't have a date, we can say,
You
They-
can say whatever
they-
you say, whatever you need to say that flushes out the date and says whatever you want to say.
okay,
the date
we'll work together on that.
The date's already
The
set.
date is set.
Okay.
The school is reserved, and they've already contacted Doug Lamalfa's office, and
Okay. I thought I heard you say it was still being worked on, so
no.
And which school?
That will happen in a day or two. Tom Taylor is working on that, but it'll have to be one outside with lights.
it kind of narrows it down, so. We'll let that go.
so there's no PSPS that night.
Yeah, hopefully not. Okay, so So it sounds like we're in concurrence. You don't need a vote, right?
I think you did.
You do?
You do?
Okay, it didn't say a vote, but I'll,
We'll make that a formal motion then.
okay.
I'll second.
Motion by Zuccolillo, seconded by Jones. So, roll call vote, Vice Mayor Crowder,
Aye.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Councilmember Schuster,
Aye.
Councilmember Zuccolillo,
Aye.
and Mayor Bowman.
Aye. 7A2, Town Council discussion, consideration adopting the daffodil as the official flower of the town of Paradise. Do we not have official flower? I don't know.
We don't have an official flower yet.
We know if
So
we're talking.
now we're on to happy news. Yeah, the poison oak, yes. So as we were convening the coordinators group for the second anniversary of the campfire, Colette Curtis brought the idea of using the daffodil as the theme, as well as asking the council to name the daffodil as the official town of Paradise flower. The more I learned about the daffodil, the more it became apparent that it was perfectly suited for this honor, and I'm delighted and honored to be asking the council to take this action. So let me share a little bit about the daffodil. Naturally, the primary significance of the daffodil is that it represents the coming of spring. However, the flower has many other meanings too, all of which seem perfectly suited to represent our town. The most common color of the daffodil is yellow, though it comes in many other colors from vivid purple to the purest white. The yellow daffodil is the trumpet that announces the arrival of spring. The yellow daffodil blooms right after the winter and so represents strength, overcoming obstacles, and the arrival of success and wealth. The meaning of flowers is also interpreted differently in other parts of the world. In China, for example, the daffodil is associated with good fortune, and in Japan, mirth and joyousness. A French language of flowers postcard attributes the daffodil with hope. While the daffodil's primary symbolism is that of new beginnings, rebirth, and the coming of spring, it has some others. Some of the most common meanings for the daffodil flower include creativity, inspiration, renewal and vitality, awareness and inner reflection, memory, and forgiveness. Daffodils were brought to America by early settlers and have naturalized in many areas of the United States. After the Humboldt fire in 2008, former Paradise resident Jane Locus, in conjunction with the Paradise Garden Club and the Magalia Beautification Group, led a movement to plant thousands of bulbs across the ridge, an annual tradition that continues today. The students of the Adventist Academy, working with the Love Paradise Group, also planted daffodil bulbs along the Yellowstone Kelly Memorial Trail and throughout the town. As the dark, wet days of the winter of 2018 softened into the gentle warmth of the spring of 2019, many of us saw these bright, happy blooms emerge through the scorched ground amid the blackened debris of our homes and lives. These tiny bits of sunshine and joy provided us with a much-needed reminder of hope for the future. Folks also see the planting of daffodils as a beautiful bridge to our neighboring communities and a way to welcome visitors to enjoy the entire ridge with the potential of events around the blooming of daffodils or maybe even a daffodil festival. I've got some little handouts for you that includes one of the most recognized poems about the daffodil by William Wordsworth, as well as a couple of photographs of first blooms that emerged after the campfire. And with that, I would like to ask but before that, I think Ward wanted to talk a little bit about the daffodil as well.
Well, thank you very much, Councilmember Schuster. Obviously, you'll recall the daffodil is kind of special to me as president of the Paradise Garden Club and co-chair of Daffodils Across the Ridge. And you are right, Jane Locus started the project for Daffodils Across the Ridge. We didn't name it that until '09. The project continues to this day. So we will be planting again for this season for next spring. So what I'd like to share with you is something that goes beyond just thinking of paradise. This is the magazine cover. Mr. Mayor, you can have the color copy. In this national publication, Country Woman, page 23, 3 growers of daffodils in communities around the country are highlighted, and we have a fairly long article about us, including the '08 and current fire season we've gone through. The Daffodils Across the Ridge project, started by Jane Locus, continues by the efforts of the Paradise Garden Club and frequently volunteers. We've had as many as 150 students from the Academy, Adventist Academy. Join us for large-scale plantings. We have, I think, 22 students committed this year to do a fairly large-scale planting on our behalf. And with this year's order, another 10,000 bulbs, this will take the total quantity of bulbs planted on the ridge to 175,000 between 2008 and now. That's a lot of bulbs. Now, I don't plant them all myself. Nobody in the garden club plants them all themselves. A lot of them we have collected donations for, 100 bulbs for $25. We don't make any money. That's what we pay for them. We get $10,000 for $2,500. But the idea is that we want to be able to continue this kind of beautification in our community. And now that we're thinking in the future, this is going to be called our flower, the town of Paradise. You know, in many cities, especially small communities and foothill communities, the California poppy is still their local flower. I used to love the poppies too. But having been turned on to the daffodil, you know, once we see hundreds, and in some locations thousands, like the ones in Valley Park, the daffodil is pretty special to this ridge. So thank you for your support. Thank you, Councilmember Schuster, for your proceeding with this to bring us to where it is our flower. You will see the garden club out working in many areas. And of course, if you're personally interested, I'll get you a bag of 100 daffodils for $25. Thank you for your time.
Also, I'd like to say the town has ordered, I think 2,000 daffodils to be handed out on November 8th in some way too. So.
Can you talk more? It's not on the agenda, but can you tell everybody what the plan is for November 8th?
Sure. So there are several events going on. Again, you know, this group that convened was just kind of a coordinators group, so we could see what everyone was doing and get that information in one place. The Paradise Chamber has a page dedicated to that, so people can go to the Paradise Chamber, which is just paradisechamber.com, I think, and scroll down, and it lists all of the events occurring in Paradise and Magalia. Couple of the things that I can touch on is there is a list of sites and areas that where there's of regrowth and rebuilding, as well as other sites like Hope Plaza and the Bear at the police station and things like that are listed so that people can do self-guided driving tours. Jess Mercer, the artist that did the Paradise Key Phoenix, is creating a wishing you, she calls it a wishing you well. And she's inviting people to write letters or thoughts or pieces of art. And she's going to be stationed in front of the community park, and people can drive by and drop those things off. And then she will later create a book for us. And then I believe that the CMA is doing an event on that day too, from 3 to 6 or 3 to 5:30. Okay. Finally, at the end of the evening, Joy Will Find a Way, which you may remember was an artist tribute, including poetry and music and all kinds of art, performance art, was done on the Sunday after, on November 9th. It kind of bookended the events of the first anniversary. That was filmed, and so that film is going to be shown at Marion Park, the drive-in in Chico. And Dan Gonzalez from Fifth Sun and the Paradise Citizens Alliance and Hope Plaza all donated, along with Theater on the Ridge and the community guilds. They all donated money so that no one has to pay to go see it, but they only have 150 carload limit, so it's usually $25 a car. It's free. You just have to go to Marion Park website and get your ticket. So that's pretty much what's going on. And there's some things going on in Magalia too. So, but they're all listed on the Paradise Chamber website.
Okay. Anybody else want to speak to the daffodil? Seeing nobody jumping to their feet, what's the council's wishes?
I'll move approval of the recommendation to make it our town flower.
I'll second.
Roll call vote. Motion by Jones, seconded by Schuster. Vice Mayor Crowder?
Aye.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Schuster?
Aye.
Councilmember Cipollillo?
Aye.
And Mayor Boland.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council reports and committee representations. Nothing for me.
I think I just did mine.
You did good. You did good. Thank you.
I kind of did mine earlier.
Did yours? Okay.
I went to BCAG and AQMD, and there was nothing really of interest on the agenda.
And I did LAFCO and nothing to report back to everybody.
I do want to add one thing. I
No.
went, as you did, to ribbon cutting at Tractor Supply,
Yes,
which
we
was a
did.
great event
Yes,
for
we
the
did.
town.
That was really cool. Support them. So if you get a chance, go there, support them, and what a great addition to have. And, they are so happy and excited about being open. So, future agenda items. I would like to ask that we do have a discussion on the December 4th deadline for our private program. And maybe do a variation of that. Maybe there's no way we're gonna get it all done by then, so we're whistling in the wind, think that's gonna happen. So we need to discuss it. Anyone else, everything? Okay, seeing nobody, town manager report?
No town manager report for this one. I'll have it for the next one.
Okay. This is great, might get to my rally. Just kidding. So we're gonna go to closed session pursuant to the Government Code Section 54956.8. Town council will hold a closed session, accepting offers on property owned and required below identified real estate property of 1181 Pearson Road in Paradise. We're talking about that, and then also some potential litigation on 2 potential cases. All right, we're going to go to closed session. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and have a good night.